Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Men Talking Mindfulness. I'm one of your hosts here, John Macaskill, and I'm alongside my brother from another mother, my good friend and co-host, Will Schneider. Today, we're going to dive deep into a topic that's really sensitive to probably a lot of our listeners and specifically our men. We're going to dive into the powerful and often misunderstood emotion of anger. And it's an emotion we've all felt, and it can have significant impacts on ourselves, but also on our most cherished relationships and the people that we most cherish, like physiologically and emotionally. What does it do to the people on the other end of this anger, right? And we're going to be discussing anger, how it manifests in us, the ripple effects it has on those we love, and what we can do about it. So let's start this journey of understanding and managing our anger to build stronger, healthier relationships. That all said, I'm going to turn it over to that brother from another mother that I mentioned, Will Schneider. Will, good to see you, brother. How you been?
That's me. I'm Will Schneider. Hi, John. Good to be back. Episode 3 of season 8. Amazing. And I'm glad we're talking about this very important topic, because I don't think we can have enough awareness around anger, especially around men, because it is like the number one identifier, the number one emotion that men often express. So I'm excited to dive into that today. So hey, get some MTM merch. We need more merch on more bodies out there. So get a hat, get a t-shirt, or maybe just have a mug for your desk would be cool too. Or we have stickers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. So beautiful. If you want to pick up or just support the show, would you? Right, go to mentalkingmindfulness.com/shop. That's mentalkingmindfulness.com/shop, and check out all that we have there. We really appreciate your support. We have a retreat coming up May 16th to the 19th in Colorado Springs. It's our Be Well to Lead Well retreat. That's May 16th to the 19th in Colorado Springs. We only have about 10 spots left, so sign up. This is going to be our third retreat, and we're excited for you to join us. And you can actually text us at Be Well, that's the letter B, W-E-L-L, at 33777 if you want more information on that retreat. So once again, that's Be Well, B-W-E-L-L, to 33777. Awesome. Also, do you know that John and I do keynote speaking engagements and mindfulness and wellness workshops? If you're interested in having one of us speak, or the two of us putting on a workshop for your team together, please reach out to us. You can reach both of us at team@mentalkingmindfulness.com. So, hey, if you want to speak with you, work with your company, help create more of a human and health-centric focus in your business, then hit up team@mentalkingmindfulness.com. And please subscribe. We're on TikTok, YouTube, IG, and I'm on X as well. You can find it at mentalkingmindfulness.com. And again, hey, thank you for being here, for tuning in, for sharing our podcast, for helping us grow. And let's just jump in and get more mindful. But first, we'll take a little pause. Let's just focus. Like we do these breathing practices to ground the show. But also, if you're feeling a little angry, a little frustrated, just doing this simple three breaths we're going to do right now can make a massive impact and shift you into different results. So whatever you're doing, maybe close the eyes if that's possible. Exhale the breath without everybody and get really empty. As you completely exhale, feel your body for a moment on the emptiness and that pause, and take a big breath in. Exhale out the mouth, nice and slow. Like a cool breeze and a beautiful, warm, relaxing summer day. And again, in breath. Let it go. Take that inhale, and as we fill, it's like an opportunity for a new moment. And the exhale is how you begin to express yourself in that moment. Calm, relaxed, smooth, easy. I am here. I am present. That kind of quality of breathing. Beautiful. Good. And maybe make some gentle, easy micro movements. And we can come back and let's discover and talk a little bit more about anger, John.
Yeah, man. Well, a couple things before we jump into that. You've probably noticed that we're streaming in a different format, different background. Hey, Will and I are constantly trying to make the show better for our listeners and for our viewers. For our listeners that don't see what I'm talking about, maybe tune in on YouTube or on Instagram. We're going to ideally start to stream this on Instagram as well, which is the driving factor behind changing the format, because now we're in, portrait mode instead of landscape mode. And we've also got some really beautiful backgrounds that Will and his executive assistant designed. So hopefully this is coming across well for you guys. That said, that background, that blue, makes me think about how cold it is outside my office right now. It's negative 10 degrees with a wind chill of negative 35. But the inside the office is also cold. It's 60 degrees in here, which is why I'm still rocking my jacket. I guess the heater can't keep up with that freezing cold, which also makes me think of anger. The cold attitude that can be anger, right? We hear people talk about a cold shoulder and everything else. Well, the reason we're having this show is, I feel as a father, there are times when I do get angry, even as a mindfulness practitioner. Mindfulness does not make you immune to anger. It does not make you immune to stress, but it does change your relationship with anger and with stress and with anxiety and a lot of other things. But I've noticed that there are times when I get angry, I see that it not only physiologically and emotionally changes how I show up in the world, but also the person that receives the anger that I'm putting out there, whether it's my wife, whether it's my children, whether it's a friend, colleague. So I wanted to have this conversation about what anger does to us and our partners in our most important relationships. And when I say partners, that's generic. It's wives, spouses, friends, family, children,
co-hosts.
Yes, co-hosts. Will and I were going back and forth. This one's pre-recorded because I'm having to work the day that we normally go live. And Will and I were going back and forth before this, changing the background and making it all happen. But we didn't get angry at one another, which is good. But I'm sure there's times when Will has gotten angry at me, and I'm sure there's times that I've gotten angry at him. And what does it do? What does it do to us? And what does it do to our partners? So I felt it was important to understand that anger is not an emotion that only affects you, right? As the person getting angry, it affects everyone around you, physically and emotionally. And I wanted to kind of unpack that and so that people understand what the effects are, the ripple effects, right? With anger. And there was one other piece I'm forgetting right now. I'm sure it'll pop back into my mind here in a second that I wanted to make sure I covered. Oh yeah, anger. We've talked about it before. Like when Will and I were first starting the show, I think we did a whole series on emotions. 5 or 6 weeks, and one of them was anger. But it was very surface level. And one of the things that we talked about is that anger is a secondary emotion, right? Most of the time, if you really take a step back from your anger, what's it stemming from? It doesn't just come out as itself. It's coming from fear. It's coming from embarrassment. It's coming from perceptive or perceived slights, those types of things. So that's what I wanted to make sure we talked about as well. Is anger in and of itself is really a secondary emotion, and to unpack it and talk about those triggers, which we'll talk about here later in this episode, and then taking a step back and addressing those triggers in a healthier way. So I wanted to talk about that. That's why I wanted to talk about it. And then, we always start with a definition of the word. Will, do you want to jump into that?
Yeah. Well, at the top, I just want to say what you said, or at the top was like, it is natural, right? I mean, and so it's not like anger is not wrong. Necessarily, it's just part of the human experience. Yeah. But are you controlling your anger, or is your anger controlling you? Right. Again, we're always putting in ourselves into that space, right? Or into that. That's what the show is about. That's what mindfulness is about. It's like, am I aware? And if I'm aware, right, I can make a change. If I'm unaware, then I'm screwed, right? I get into all the problems and all the things that anger does to us physiologically and emotionally, and then we behave based on anger, and then it just turns into a big fucking mess. So various. Oh, so what do we got? Define anger. Defining. Okay, anger is a strong feeling of annoyance, displeasure, or hostility. It can manifest as annoyance, rage, fury, or resentment. The opposite of anger is pleasure and good humor, and are often considered the opposites of anger, representing a calm and content state of mind. Right. So this is like, I love setting it right in the beginning. Right. Anger, we have been always. We know when we're not our best selves and we're expressing rage or fury or resentment or being hostile or, being a malcontent in some ways, but then the other side, it's like, I think what's nice is like, where do you want to guide yourself to with this awareness, right? And we're naturally our best selves when we're calm, we have a content state of mind, we're more relaxed, we're more breath oriented instead of anger oriented. So it can really make a big difference.
Something that I've started doing. I'm not a big transcendental meditation guy. I'm not against it. I just haven't personally gotten a whole lot out of it. I know a lot of other folks have gotten a ton out of it, and it's
millions
very
of
powerful.
People, yeah.
Millions, right? And I have started to delve a little bit into it with a mantra, and it's even less of a mantra. It's just one single word, and it's patience. Or I will also play with the word expectations. We've done episodes on managing stress and anxiety around the holidays, and a lot of that stress and anxiety comes from expectations. The word expectations. What are we expecting about the holidays? And then when we go into this party, it doesn't match those expectations, and then we get upset. And you really boil it down to life. I mean, all these other triggers that we're going to talk about here shortly, it really boils down to expectations, like your expectations of what your children are going to do, and they're not doing it. You expect what traffic is going to look like, and it looks completely different. You expect what a show, like our show, like maybe we expect it's going to go awesome, and it doesn't, and we get angry about it. It really boils down to expectations, at least in my opinion. And then having the patience to understand that a lot of your expectations are unrealistic. And coming back to another episode that we've done before on narcissism, if you think that the world revolves around you and that everything is going to fit your expectations, that's being narcissistic. And maybe taking a step back and understanding, hey, guess what? The world doesn't revolve around you. Yes, you're a wonderful person. I believe you're a wonderful person. Will, I believe you're a wonderful person. Our listeners and watchers, I believe you are wonderful people. But we all have to understand that the world doesn't revolve around us, and our expectations are rarely going to meet reality. So, just a little soapbox.
I mean, no, I'm absolutely with you. Like, and I understand that those expectations, that's what screws me. That's when I get angry. That's when I get angry. It's like when things, I put, a story in my mind about this is the way things should be, and then they don't meet those expectations. And all of a sudden my ego gets insulted. It's like, why isn't this matching like how I want, Will Schneider's world to be? You're always going to be, frustrated. You're always going to be angry. You're always going to be not definitely showing up as your best self, because what happens when, we get into a state of anger and we let anger actually kind of, I think it's a key distinction, let anger get the best of us, right? There's a moment, right? But we have to be able to find that moment, that gap, in that STIA process, right?
STIA,
like what is what's the trigger, right? Or what's the stimulus, right? And if we practice and we get more calm and understand our breathing, which is a huge elixir for anger, then we can control more of our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions in that regard.
That's the STIA process, real quick, that Will mentioned, STIA. For those of you who have not listened to our episodes with Dr. Seth Hickerson, STIA is the stimulus, and that drives a thought. that thought drives an emotion, and that emotion drives an action. And if you can inject a pause in between the stimulus and the thought, that's going to change the thought, which changes the emotion, which changes the action. Sorry,
Right.
Will, I just wanted to make
No,
sure.
that's okay. I mean, and that's the way every, healthy human brain works. It goes through this entire process. But with our awareness and practice, we can hack in and change the outcome, change the thoughts, change the feelings, change the actions. But when we are deeply triggered, and like get to know your triggers, like
Yeah.
and they're really important because that's where it starts. Like if you know that this person triggers you, this environment triggers you, this particular sound or whatever triggers you, then how can you avoid those triggers so you don't kind of slip down the rest of the STIA slope, if you will?
Right.
Because when we are anger, we're in amygdala hijack, and our amygdala is putting all sorts of cortisol and adrenaline are the major hormones that are involved when we're angry, and then we that's when we literally lose our mind, right? And we just start behaving as an angry person, and how do angry people behave? They fight back. They can be, violent with their words or their actions. They could be condescending, passive aggressive, like, there's so many different expressions of anger. I mean, what are yours? Like, those of you here listening, it's like, what are your common expressions of anger? And, and it probably changes, like how does anger show up at work? How does anger show up in my, in my close relationships? Like, how does anger show up, when I'm with myself? You know what I mean? Like, how are you with yourself as far as anger?
Yeah.
How is that showing up? And that's a great indicator of where else it's showing up too. It's just kind of analyze yourself to start. It'd be a great thing to do.
Right.
And these emotions, like, and these, I guess, almost like tertiary emotions can lead to guilt and anxiety and depression. So it can really build upon itself in a very negative way. But you can stop it. What am I missing here, John?
Well, I just want to come back to the amygdala hijack, right? And what is that? So the amygdala is kind of in charge of our sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic one is there for fight, flight, or freeze, and then the parasympathetic side is the other side. That's the rest and digest side of our nervous system. And that's where we want to live more often. But that amygdala hijack, it does trigger that fight or flight response, or actually more accurately reaction, and that increases our heart rate and our blood pressure. And you talked about it leading to the guilt and the anxiety and the depression. But then behaviorally, what do we do? What's the action piece, right? In that STIA process, so the stimulus, thought, emotion, and action. What does it do? Well, it can result in aggression. It can break down the communication that we have. We talked about crucial conversations. We had a whole episode on crucial conversations and how a lot of the time when we go into a conversation, we're going in to have just that, a conversation. But as soon as we get the amygdala hijack, now the goal of the conversation is to win, and we don't hear what the other people are saying. We really get this communication breakdown. And what else? Impaired decision making. I know when I've taken a step back after getting angry. So now I've taken a step back, but it's too late. I've gotten angry and I've done something. I've reacted. I've yelled. I've used words I wouldn't normally use. Whatever. That is impaired decision making. And then I take that step back and I look and I'm like, oh my gosh, I turned into a monster. And that's too late at that point. Now I need to catch myself in the act, and what I'm doing to myself physiologically and emotionally. But then on the receiving end, I went to I don't know if it was a retreat. I guess it is a retreat. It was a retreat that I helped to facilitate a month and a half back for the foundation called All Secure, the All Secure Foundation. It's for special operators, founded by a former Delta Force guy. And he was talking with his wife on stage, and they were talking about secondary post-traumatic stress injury. And I like to call it post-traumatic stress injury because that's literally what I feel it is. And it has, there's science behind it. It is a physical injury to your brain when you get this post-traumatic stress. But secondary post-traumatic stress injury, what is that? It is when somebody that is having post-traumatic stress injury complications or challenges, and they inflict similar complications or challenges on somebody else in their relationship. And then that could be a spouse, it could be a friend, it could be a family member, another family member. But what are we doing? We are causing them that guilt, that anxiety, that depression that we talk about, the emotional sides. And then the physiological side is we're causing them to go into fight, flight, or freeze. And we're increasing their heart rate and their blood pressure. And now we're causing them to have aggression and communication breakdown and impaired decision making. So it is a literal trickle down effect there. Yeah. What happens to us, we are causing the same thing to happen to somebody else. And if you truly love somebody, take a step back and say, you know what? I really love this person. Do I want to inflict that injury, that harm on them? Of course not. Of course we don't. Right. So, that's where it can really get into what the body does to ourselves, and then what we do to others, their bodies, their minds, their nervous systems.
Well, it creates creates an environment, right? Creates an environment within. Yeah. Right. And then environment is like fucking it's like a heavy storm or a blizzard or a massive thunderstorm just rolling inside of us. But it also creates that same environment on the outside. We're energetic beings, and anger has a frequency just like authenticity or vulnerability, right? And they're picked up by other people. And when you're expressing the frequency of anger, you're sending these vibes out into the world. That creates like an external environment, and what does it do, to people in that environment? Like, I know, like, I gotta either stand my ground or, get out of there or defend myself in some way, Rumi says, beyond the ideas of right doing and wrong doing, and that part right there talks about that game of who's right that I've said many times in the show. It's like, that's like kind of the ego's way of expressing itself in the world, is always trying to be right, or you know what I mean, or just kind of show that it's the utmost importance. But beyond the idea of right doing and wrong doing, and that's where we can get really angry and frustrated, and things can really get heated if you keep like in that conversation and keep growing into that feeling. But beyond those feelings is a field. And he says, I'll meet you there. And that's where, exactly. And that's where, that's where we are our best, right? That is the field of new opportunity, right? Instead of, going back to the war of wrongdoing and right doing, right? We're just going to take you to the same results, because, there's no new opportunity there if you're hijacked by anger or just hijacked emotionally anyway, right? But through that amygdala hijack. I have John, I have here, and this might just kind of set the tone for the rest of the conversation. I use this understanding anger. I did when I did my Betterment project back here in New York in September for my for the work I was doing to get that certificate with Stanford University, be an ambassador of compassion. One thing I as I was researching understanding anger, it says, and I just pulled this up as we were coming to this episode. I'm like, oh, this would be perfect. Yeah. So anger is wrongly perceived as manly, which I thought was interesting, right? It's a dangerous emotion, which we're talking about. It's toxic to you and others, which we just mentioned as well. Anger is suffering. Think about that. You're suffering when you're angry. Is often used as justification for violence and aggression. Right. And it's frequently, I love this one. It's frequently me oriented, selfish and judgmental.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, come back to the narcissism.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was really hit me. It's like, wow, it's really it's a selfish way of expressing yourself, which, and in that expression, it's just like, oh, the world's not meeting my needs. I'm like, coming back to what you said, expectations earlier, it's just like, it's such a slippery slope. Yeah. Often anger sickens the mind, alienates others, and destroys relationships. We've all experienced this, I'd imagine. Often derives from self-absorption. Again, this whole me thinking and, the narcissistic is one way to express anger, and derives from holding on to righteous positions, right? Like, I'm right, you're wrong, coming back to that game. Yep. And the last one here is anger gets in the way of any new possibilities other than the result, the one that results in conflict. So those are some notes I had on anger for my workshop, but
Well, yeah, I mean, I like the fact that you mentioned anger is thought of as manly, right? And I think that's one of the reasons we did the original episodes on anger is that it is one of the emotions that is acceptable for men, right? So we can't cry, we can't show embarrassment, we can't show fear. So what's the alternative to those emotions that we supposedly can't show? Is anger. So if we're scared, rather than showing fear, we show anger and false bravado. If we're sad, rather than showing that we are upset, we get angry and we start yelling and breaking things, right? Throwing things and breaking things. And that makes us feel like we're manly. But let me tell you, losing your temper, yes, it's human. And I'm not saying that Will and I don't lose our tempers. And I'm not saying that you as a listener are wrong for ever losing your temper, but controlling your temper, let me tell you, there's nothing stronger than that on this planet. And I don't want to say more manly, because there's very many strong women that listen to this show too, and they demonstrate patience and control over their anger, and that is true strength right there. When it's right. Now there's also, we will talk about, when being angry is right, when being angry is healthy, and expressing that anger, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I want to talk about, a little bit more about those triggers and what fuels it. And I know you added into the notes, alcohol can exacerbate anger, but preconceived notions and expectations. And I know you want to come back to that alcohol in a second. One of the things for me is making sure that I'm taking care of myself, self-care. So I know we're talking about being a narcissist, but also we need to take care of ourselves. And specifically for me, if I am tired, or if I'm hungry, and like hangry, right? We've all heard the term hangry before. I get hangry. And if something happens that is not meeting my expectations after I am already tired or after I am already hungry, I resort to the limbic system. I go back to the limbic system, and my brain kind of shuts down and everything, my anger takes over. But luckily I have been practicing mindfulness and meditation, and I notice when I'm tired and I notice when I'm hungry, and I can take some breaths and step back and say, you know what, I need to go just take a nap, or I need to rest for a minute, or I need to get something in me as far as food. But what else can exacerbate that anger, Will? You talked about the alcohol piece.
Yeah, I mean, alcohol for sure. Like, I tend to be like a happy drunk, right, personally, or like a happy buzzed person. Like I just want to have more fun, I guess, and and get a little silly. But I know other people I know very close to me, like one drink or half a drink, and they kind of shift into Mr. Hostility or Mrs. Hostility. And it's like, and it's almost, it's sad to see this transformation occur almost immediately to people that I know, and like, and like everything becomes a problem. Like, and it just, I don't want to be around in those situations. I don't want to be hanging out. I'd rather just escape, and go, like, I'd rather spend alone time than just be like trying to walk on eggshells, for this particular person's, selfishness is, what we're understanding anger to be, in some ways. So very me oriented. And the sleep thing is a big deal, really big deal, and if we don't have that good deep sleep, which rests the body, if we don't have that REM sleep, which helps to relax and prune the mind of its stress, we wake up and we're already starting the day with one step back. And it's just hard to recover from that. And also you mentioned food, and some foods can be very inflammatory. And I was reading a little article in WebMD before we started, talking about, like, they did this study on like 2 inflammatory markers, and when these markers increased in their in their numbers, anger would increase. So and definitely there's food that can create inflammation in our body, and that inflammation can lead or could put you in the position that you might be feeling anger more often. So there is it's not always just like what we're feeding our mind and what's going on in the environment, but it's also, are we nourishing our body properly? Are we sleeping? Are, all the things that, we almost should have like anger hygiene, John.
Oh man,
right?
I think you just coined a new term, man.
Yeah,
I love
right,
it. Anger
right.
hygiene.
Yeah, right. You're right. I mean, because it's just like, so what do you need to not be angry?
Yeah.
The fucking next day or during the day, you know what I mean? And like anger hygiene, I think we just coined this term, John.
Yeah.
Could be like, like what about like, how about also, John, is like keeping a healthy body.
Yeah.
Right. If that's one way to prevent anger. Like if you have that's a great outlet to express all that BS, that might be kind of rattling inside us, going, taking that walk or going to the gym and like grunting it out a little bit, we had, I can't believe his name. He did the second one, everyman thing, not Mark.
Jeff Harris.
Jeff, yeah. He fucking would, his dad gave him a punching bag.
Yeah. Yep.
And he would just beat on this punching bag, get all this stuff out, and he was just a much, from what I remember, he was just a much more easier person to be around when he was able to do this every day,
he's a self-proclaimed asshole. My wife and I had dinner with he and his wife, I don't know, a couple weeks ago. And she was telling me that he is much less of an asshole. She didn't say he's not one, but she said he's much less of one because he's practicing these things. Jeff, shout out to you, brother. And I know you're a listener, and we appreciate
Jeff Harris. Yeah, that's
Jeff
right.
Harris.
Thank you, Jeff.
So, and with that anger hygiene, the self-care, one thing that I know many of us do, and I've been guilty of this in the past, is we put ourselves into a reactionary stance before we get out of bed. And what I mean by that is our alarm clock goes off, and our alarm clock, depending on what type of alarm clock you use, that is, you react to that. So you're already getting into a state of sympathetic reaction. And then a lot of us use our phones as our alarm clock. Our phone's right here as our alarm clock. And then we lay there in bed after already reacting to the alarm clock, and then we jump on social media, and we jump on email, and we jump on bank accounts and whatever else. And all of this is putting us into a reactionary stance, further into a reactionary stance before we ever get out of bed. So that's setting us up to get angry before we've even had our first cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Right off the bat. That's self-care, man.
Yeah, self-care. Well, I mean, what is, so thinking about like what can stir, what are some of the things that stir anger in you or bring you anger, and we talk about like, so the environment that you're in, whether, a place that you work or something like that. Let me take a step back. So come back to social media, right? Like that could be a great, incredible, they call it doom scrolling, right?
Yeah.
When you feel doom, like a secondary reaction might be anger, right? Because it's like, oh, the world is so full of injustice and whatever. And like, and it just puts you in, like when you're in, we come back to that, that victim versus abundant mindset, victim versus hero, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to be the victim, that victim is going to be laden with tons of anger and regret and all sorts of negative emotions that do not access your potential, but actually dim your light and limit your potential significantly. And you keep putting you in the same situations and you keep yielding the same results, right? So, so what can you do, right, to eliminate things that create anger? Social media is a great one. Like, if you win your morning, right, you're going to have an opportunity to win your day. What does it look like to win your morning?
Yeah.
Right. Like for me, I'm doing this, and I got all my students now, I got them all this 5-minute journal in the morning. And the 5-minute journal starts with, and it starts with a nice quote of the day. It says, "Hey, 3 things you're grateful for." What a great elixir for anger.
Yeah.
Great gratitude instead of like gratitude. And the other one, 3 items it asked is like, what will make today great? right? Think about like what's going to make today great? What does it mean to have a great day? Right. And the other, one other question that asks, it's like, what's an affirmation for the day? And that could be another way to self-talk on the inside, to be like, whatever that is, instead of, because you begin to take control of your mind right in those very first moments of the day. You're going to have just a better opportunity to not slip down that slope of doing the same things over and over.
Right.
Yeah.
I want to come back to something you said is understanding the environment that you're in, right? So a lot of the time, it's also not just the environment that you put yourself in, but your perception of the environment that you put yourself in, right? So, I mean, some of us could be in a beautiful, like on a beautiful beach, and it's a beautiful physical environment, but for some reason we're angry already, and now we're like, oh, this dang sand is hurting my toes, or I don't know. We'll find something to be angry about in the environment that we're in, even if the environment is beautiful. And that can be a physical environment, but it could also be an emotional environment. It could be a relationship environment that we're in, and we're highlighting the negative aspects of these relationships or environments because it feeds our anger and validates the emotion that we're already feeling. So maybe taking a step back and saying, hey, am I truly perceiving this environment negatively, or am I making myself feel that I perceive it negatively? And that's kind of working your way out of it. And maybe the way to do that is by doing exactly what you just said and expressing some gratitude, saying, you know what, I'm thankful for this relationship that I'm in. I'm thankful for my spouse, for my friend, for my children. Coming back to Jeff Harris, this is going to turn out to be the Jeff Harris show. Something that he says all the time is rather than I have to, he says, I get to. I get to do this. And changing that framework in your mind, reframing, that can change your perspective. And in changing your perspective, you can come out of that anger, perhaps, not necessarily, but perhaps. But some of the other ways of preventing that anger, and you talked about some already, Will, getting out, working out, getting into the gym, maybe staying off your phone and staying off social media for a period, staying off news media, depending on your political stance. If you watch X channel, then you're going to get angry. Or if you're on the other side of the aisle and you watch Y channel, then you're going to get angry. So, check your news media consumption. Positive self-talk can be very helpful. Obviously, the show is Men Talking Mindfulness, so practicing some level of mindfulness and or meditating. That's self-care, coming back to self-care. And then, if you need to, if it's really getting to a point that you're struggling with anger, seeking that professional help, going out and getting counseling. I think that's absolutely imperative. And that takes some humility, understanding that you're not perfect and that you need help. But that humility is also another sign of strength. Vulnerability, as Brene Brown always talks about. Brene Brown in her Netflix special, in her TED Talk, and all her amazing books, is talking about what a strength vulnerability is, and asking for help is a sign of vulnerability. So I just wanted to touch on that. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think like you take an inventory. Like if you're an angry person, thank you for mentioning. Like every guy that's listening out there that thinks like, therapy is for weaklings or for lesser men or for, a bunch of fairies or something like that. I mean, it's the dumbest thinking. It's some of the dumbest thinking I've ever heard in my life. And it's so negative. It keeps us from, maturing our masculinity as a whole. We've had at least one episode, Dr. Shauna Springer, about men in therapy. Yep. And it could just be to talk about your anger and to become, in the process of talking about your anger, becoming more aware of the things we're talking about, the triggers, the environments, but also how anger is destroying your life. It is something that, it is useful in I'd say very select few times in our lifetime. Anger is actually probably the right thing to express. Most of the time, probably 90% of the time, it is not the best, way to go about things. But if you just even after you listen to this episode, take 5 minutes and then, write out like, when do I most often express anger? And then it's just like, how does that anger show up? right? And then it's just like, what is anger preventing me from? What is anger destroying in my life? What relationships? What is it doing for my work? What opportunities am I missing because of it? Because I have in the notes here, it's like, that anger is the theft of opportunity.
Yeah.
If you're locked into this mindset of this selfishness and like, oh, the world's not meeting my needs, so I got to throw a freaking tantrum. It's like, that's like, and you might have just right next to you, or the person that you're talking to could be the person that you've been looking for years to help move your business, your life onto the next step. But because you're close, like that's one thing about anger. It puts it puts your shield up, right? But it starts to put, and I love this term, I heard it a long time ago, it paints an enemy image on someone else. Because you need to protect yourself against somebody. That guy's the problem, or that situation's the problem, and I need to like bring up all of my weapons that I've gained over my lifetime in order to defend myself in this perceived hostile situation. And it probably, all those feelings have absolutely no basis in the reality of what's going on in the moment, right? It's like, it's so destructive.
It is. And you talked about anger being wrong in 90%. I mean, obviously that's a statistic we kind of pulled out of the area, right? Yeah. But I understand
from our experience, though. From my experience, like when I express anger, it's mostly fucking useless. But
but we've talked about it being a human response, human reaction, quite often, and quite often it's a secondary response or secondary emotion. When can anger be that 10%, right? 15%, whatever it is, when is it actually appropriate? And I was doing a meditation recently on anger. It's on the app Insight Timer. And at the very beginning, the guide guiding me through the meditation, she says that there are a few times when anger is a healthy emotion, and it's times of injustice, like the civil rights movement. I mean, we are recording this on Martin Luther King Day right here, right? And I'm sure that many who were involved in the civil rights movement were angry, and that anger at times was expressed in a very healthy way, and it led to positive changes in the country, in the world, for that matter. So there are times when, if it's I think perceived injustice or a literal injustice, that is when I believe anger is an appropriate emotion, as long as we can express it in a healthy way. You can still be angry, but expressing it by throwing bottles and throwing tantrums, that's not going to get anything. That's not going to have that constructive feedback. It's not going to lead to positive changes. Whereas if we are angry and we still practice some level of self-control, we can express that anger in a calm way. You can be angry and express it in a calm way, and quite often that can be more powerful. I remember growing up, my parents didn't express anger a whole lot. The times they did, there were two forms of it. There were times that they yelled, and I mean, it wasn't no kind of abuse, but yelling. But the times that my dad was angry at me and he just looked at me and he said, "I'm disappointed," I tell you what, nothing hit home like that. My mom doing the same thing. If my mom tells me that she's disappointed in me, no amount of yelling is going to drive home the point like that. So if we are angry and we can express it in a calm way, quite often the desire that we have, the desired effect of our anger, can be more powerful if we express it in a calm, cool, and collected way. Just a thought. Yeah.
No, and another thing about anger too, to come back to what you said, like it could be a galvanizing force, right? Absolutely. But what is the force behind that anger, right? And if it's something like injustice, then it could be used in order to find solutions in order to overcome that injustice. But if it's anger that's being fueled by ignorance, we just see this so much in politics. It's like by untruths, by you being lied to, by, you being gaslighted or something like that. And it's like, whoa, I mean, this is why these practices of mindfulness, and this is why meditation is so important, John, because when I stop and get still and demand myself to just do the best I can to be present in the moment, or depending on the kind of meditation you're doing, right? But just, I suggest if anyone's out there, and you want to take that first step to meditation, just do a simple breath meditation. Get to know your breath. Right. This is like also the breathing, not just in meditation, but in general, is a fantastic means to relax from the amygdala hijack and slow down that flood of cortisol and adrenaline. Get grounded, put on like your, instead of your angry lenses, put on, clear lenses and really see, what is really going on in this situation, and then, begin to move forward in that way. And this is the breath's going to help you. But how do you get to know the breath? Like, I mean, yes, you can get to know the breath by, going to the gym and working out and trying to, breathe and walk on the treadmill or run. But what's really nice with the breathing and meditating and breathing and understanding your breath through utilizing breath to facilitate a meditation practice is because you get to know like how deep it can go, how you can control your breath, how it helps you to relax the mind and the body, how it puts you into this present moment, how it, clears that fog of distress or whatever kind of is bothering you, or at least you're aware that is bothering you, and maybe it's not going to bother you as much. And this is like, anger hygiene. I would say number one, like anger. You can use it anywhere, John. God, it's ours, right? It's ours, man. It's been talking mindfulness right here. It's just like, I think one of the first steps is like own your day. One way to own your day is to get in touch with your breath, relax, and get still for some time. And if you keep, stacking up meditations every day, you're going to become naturally a less angered and reactive person. Right. And and in the process of doing that, you're going to be more, people are going to like hanging out with you. People are going to want to work with you. You're not going to create that very hostile environment where, there's people in my life, people that are very close to me that like, as soon as I and this is part of my problem too sometimes, like as soon as I know I'm going to see this person, I'm like, oh, fuck, like I got to start walking on eggshells because like, who knows what kind of selfish attitude this guy has. And you say one thing, all of a sudden, you're fuck, man, I got to defend myself now. Right. And I'm getting better just leaving the room and be like, you know what, you can take your anger and, go kick a bunch of cats or something like that. Sorry. Don't go kick cats. No, I'm just sorry. I'm not advocating violence, but you know what I'm saying? But it's like, don't kick me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I don't want to be kicked. Who wants to be kicked? Yeah. And it's like, and how many times you can get kicked until you realize, you know what, like, I just don't want to be around that person anymore. And if you're that person creating that relationship and creating that dynamic in your relationships, then again, go get some help. Get some help. Go talk to somebody. Go work out. Stop eating like shit. Stop sleeping like shit. And realize like, that you can control your life, but you have to take control you have to take the necessary steps in order to gain that self-control and that self-mastery that's needed. So you are not, just putting vitriol and hate and rage in the world. Another thing I had here, John, it's like, if you think this isn't an important conversation, and if you've gotten this far in the broadcast, you think it is. But one way to maybe help other people and understand their anger, it's like, how do you want to be remembered? Like, what's the legacy you want to leave? Right? I mean, if you if you have, take a moment, do this meditation. It's like, imagine what people are going to say at your funeral. Do you want them to say like, oh, he was an angry asshole? Or like, oh, wow, he was kind and generous and, helpful and whatever. You know what I mean? Like inspirational, right? I definitely don't want to remember his anger. And I'm doing everything I can to establish a legacy. Men Talking Mindfulness is part of that legacy because I just want to contribute to society. I want to remember it as somebody that has helped men, that has helped other people, be better people. Yeah. That's it. And that could just be, thank you. That could just be a friendly hello and being kind to people instead of like, it's so, I'm getting angry just talking about anger, John. Because, sorry.
Don't get angry talking about it.
Oh yeah, you're right. I got to take a couple breaths.
Take a breath. Yeah, well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap it up. And and I've actually got a meditation that I'll guide us through. It's probably going to be a little bit longer than our typical ending meditation, but why not? So, hey, I just want to put out to our listeners and our viewers, for those who are experiencing anger, tune into the show, because we do give tools. It may not be directly related to anger, but mindfulness, meditation, eating healthier, getting better sleep, that's all taking care of yourself. And as we've covered in the show, self-care can be hugely helpful in managing your anger. It's not going to eliminate it, but it can be helpful in managing it. And for those who have tuned in for the show on video, thank you. For those who listen later in the podcast form, thank you. We appreciate you. Tune in to our social media platforms that are out there. Give us a review, subscribe on the different social media platforms, give us a review for the podcast itself, and then share it far and wide. Again, not because we want to be famous influencers, but because we feel that the work that we are doing can greatly improve people's lives. So if you do know someone who could benefit, share it with them. So that all said, let's get into the closing practice. And like I said, it's going to be a little bit longer than our typical closing practice. So let's begin by getting comfortable and into a safe position, safe and comfortable position, safe and comfortable physically and emotionally, since we're talking about emotional control here. Let's begin by taking a few breaths, inhaling through your nose, filling your lungs completely, and then exhale slowly through your mouth. And with each exhale, imagine releasing some of that tension, some of that anxiety, some of that stress from your body. That tension, that anxiety, that stress can often be something that causes or exacerbates our anger. And now just feel your feet on the ground, your body supported by the chair or the floor if you're standing, and just ground yourself in this moment. In this place, in this time. And further turn your attention to the physical sensations in your body. And let's start from the top of your head. We'll slowly move down, all the way down to your toes. Scanning in between your head and your toes. Noticing any areas of tension, and pay particular focus to your jaw. Maybe you're clenching your jaw, your neck, your shoulders.
That's where my anger is, John.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you, man.
Yeah.
Your stomach sometimes. These are areas where anger can manifest physically as pain or tension. And as you identify these areas, breathe into them. And you're probably wondering what I mean by that. Just breathe in and imagine that breath going to that area of stress, of pain, of tension. And visualize that tension melting away with each exhalation. And then gently bring your mind to a recent challenge, a recent situation where you felt anger. And try to observe this memory as a neutral spectator, almost an out-of-body experience, without judging or reliving the emotions. And acknowledge the anger that you felt and recognize that anger is a natural emotion, but quite often we express that emotion irrationally. Just recognize the anger without judgment. And then ask yourself, what was underneath that anger? As we talked about on the show, often anger is a secondary emotion. It masks other feelings like hurt, fear, frustration. These are the feelings underneath anger. Breathe into these feelings, allowing yourself to acknowledge and accept them. And now turn your attention towards compassion. Start with yourself, self-compassion. Remind yourself that feeling anger is human and that you are doing your best. Extend this compassion outward. If another person was involved in your anger, imagine sending them thoughts of loving kindness, of peace and understanding. And now repeat silently to yourself, I release my anger to make space for peace and understanding. And I choose to respond with calmness and compassion. I release my anger to make space for peace and understanding. I choose to respond with calmness and compassion. And now, as we come to a close, bring your awareness back to your breath, taking a few more deep, conscious breaths, feeling the ground beneath you, the air on your skin, any sounds around you. And then start to bring some movement back into your body. Start gently rolling your head, your shoulders, maybe wiggling your fingers. And then when you're ready, start to blink your eyes open. And that, ladies and gentlemen, I know longer than my regular closing practice, but I thought it was appropriate. So you may have seen me kind of looking around while Will was talking there for a second, because I wanted to bring up the text for that, because I remember how powerful that guided meditation was for me. And yes, thank you for allowing me to lead you guys through that meditation. So, Will, wrap it up, brother.
No, that was great, John. Thank you. And yeah, maybe go back and listen to this episode again. We've kind of packed it with a lot of different information in different ways that can help you avoid anger. Maybe just take that little stock of how is that little inventory of anger and how it's affecting your life, how it's affecting your decisions. Are you where you want to be or not because of anger? So, and this can just help inspire you to take those necessary steps and get the help that you need. And, if you need help, my God, I would love to help you. Right? I'm not a therapist, but I could definitely help you become more aware of your anger and utilize and begin to wake up the practices that are needed to be more of that person that you envision and not the anger person that maybe you are. So awesome, John. Yeah, always a pleasure, man. I love doing the show, and thank you. And I love our new visuals. And if you're out there, let us know what you think. Like, leave a comment. Like, do you like this new background instead of the black? We do, but we'd love to have your feedback as well, because this is your show as much as it is ours. So awesome, John. Thank you. Try not to get angry today, John. Okay, we gotta live the life that we're talking.
That's right. All right, brother. Love you, man.
Thanks, man.
For our audience,
Peace.
until next time. Peace.
Peace. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you walk away with some new tools and insights to guide you on your life journey. New episodes are being published every week, so please join us again for some meaningful discussion. For more information, please check out mentalkingmindfulness.com.